Everything I'm about to tell you happened on Christmas week, and none of us understood the danger until it was inches from our faces. Before we begin, take a breath, because what you're about to hear is far from ordinary. These aren't campfire tales or urban legends passed from one person to another. These are real stories, real people, real nights when Christmas lights were glowing in warm windows, when holiday music filled the air, when families were wrapping gifts and preparing dinner, all while danger moved quietly in the shadows just outside their door. Tonight, you're going to step into 3 Christmas experiences that changed lives forever. Stories of strangers who weren't who they claimed to be, of footsteps in the snow that didn't belong, of a moment growing colder and colder until the truth finally revealed itself. These stories will chill you all the way to the bone, not because of what's supernatural, but because everything you're about to hear actually happened. And here's the thing. Each story carries something deeper, a warning, a lesson, a reminder that instinct is often our first line of defense, and that even in the most festive season of the year, awareness can save your life. So settle in. Keep your doors locked and let your mind wander as we begin this journey into 3 shocking true Christmas stories you'll never forget. And before we dive in, if you enjoy true stories told with depth, emotion, and real-life suspense, hit that subscribe button. Your support helps this channel grow and lets us continue bringing you powerful stories just like these. Now, let's begin. I still remember the first moment I realized something was wrong. Before I knew her name, before I understood who she really was, before that night when I woke up paralyzed on my own couch with a stranger towering over me. I've replayed it so many times in my mind that it feels almost like a movie scene, except it wasn't fiction and the fear wasn't dramatic. It was real, it was slow, it was quiet, and it built inside me long before she stepped inside my house on that December night. The truth is, I didn't see the danger coming because I wasn't looking for it. I was lonely. I was hopeful. I was trying to convince myself I was ready to move on. It had only been 3 months since the end of my 5-year relationship, and I was still sharing the house with memories I hadn't fully let go of. When you sit alone long enough, when you eat dinner alone, watch movies alone, wake up alone, you start craving connection so much that red flags look like warm light. And when someone shows you attention, even the smallest bit, you start imagining versions of them that don't exist. That's what I did with Lena. I didn't know her beyond a few conversations and a handful of Snapchat photos. But when she messaged me out of nowhere one night in December, something about the timing made it feel like more than it was. Christmas lights were going up around the neighborhood. Couples were out shopping together, and the emptiness inside my house felt louder than usual. So when she replied to a simple holiday story I'd posted and asked if I wanted company, it felt like exactly what I needed, or what I thought I needed. If I had known that message would lead to one of the most terrifying nights of my life, I would have ignored it. I would have put the phone down. I would have gone to sleep early. I would have done anything except invite her into my home. But I didn't know. And that's how these things happen. Not with a scream, not with a threat, not with some obvious sign of danger. They happen quietly. That night started like any other. I was sitting in my living room pretending to watch a Christmas movie I'd already seen, pretending to be relaxed even though I knew I was waiting for her message. When she finally said she wanted to come over to help me decorate my tree, something in me felt a spark. Not excitement exactly, but possibility. I told her to come at 9. By 7:30, I was already rushing to the liquor store, trying to pick out wine that didn't look like I bought it, hoping to impress someone. By 8, I was vacuuming, wiping down counters, rearranging pillows, doing everything I used to do effortlessly when my ex still lived here. By 9, I was sitting on the couch trying to look casual even though my heart was beating too quickly. 9 came, then 9:15, then 9:30. I assumed she wasn't coming. Online dating is like that, especially when you're almost 30 and trying to pretend it still feels fun. But then she messaged me, "I'm outside." 4 seconds later, my front door opened, and the woman who stepped into my home was not the woman I had pictured. She was taller, for one thing, much taller, 6 feet at least, broad-shouldered, sharp features, hair pulled back in a way that made her look older than she claimed. And the smell, God, the smell, it hit me before anything else. A thick, sweet perfume that clung to her like she had bathed in it. But beneath it, just faintly, there was something else. Something sour, something human in a way that made me swallow hard against my own discomfort. She stepped inside like she had been here before. "Hi," I said, my voice catching. "Evan," she said, smiling like she already knew me. She sat next to me, too close, and I remember the way her knee pressed against mine immediately. No introduction, no hesitation, just proximity that felt intentional. The first thing that struck me was her eyes. Not their color, but the way they moved. Slow when they should have been quick. Quick when they should have been still. There was something searching in them, something calculating. Something trying to map the room behind me even as she looked at my face. If I hadn't been so eager to feel connected to someone again, maybe I would have noticed that earlier. I offered her wine. She accepted. I poured 2 glasses and handed hers over. The way she grabbed it, fast, almost snatching, sent a flicker of unease through my chest. Then she spilled it. A single splash of red across my light blue couch. She apologized too quickly, too repeatedly, like she was trying to perform guilt rather than feel it. I cleaned up the stain, smiling through the frustration, trying to keep the atmosphere from collapsing under the weight of the awkwardness. "Do you want to start on the tree?" I finally asked, hoping movement would ease the tension. She nodded. That was the first moment I noticed how strangely she watched me, not flirtatiously. Not shyly, but like she was studying the way I moved, the way I reached for things, the way I disappeared up the attic ladder. Her eyes didn't follow me with attraction. They followed me with intent. I climbed into the attic to pull down the heavy artificial tree sections. Usually this was something my ex and I did together, laughing as we tried not to knock dust everywhere. Tonight I was alone up there, feeling the cold draft and the strange dizziness that buzzed in the back of my skull. At the time, I blamed the wine. Now I know better. When I came downstairs the last time, carrying the heavier base section of the tree, she was gone. Not in the bathroom, not in the kitchen, not on the couch. Gone. I called her name. No answer. I checked my phone and saw she hadn't opened my message. The dizziness grew stronger. My thoughts fogging up like they were underwater. I remember collapsing onto the couch, telling myself I just needed a few minutes to rest. The TV flickered softly in front of me, but the sound felt miles away. My limbs were heavy. My breathing slowed. My eyelids felt too thick. I wasn't passing out. I was being pulled under. The next thing I remember, clearly, vividly, as if I'm still there, I opened my eyes into absolute darkness. The TV was off. The lights were off. The room was silent except for the faint hum of my own pulse. I tried to move my arm and felt nothing. No strength. No coordination. like my body wasn't mine. I lifted my phone from somewhere beneath me. The screen lit up, and in the bright white reflection on the glass, I saw it. A silhouette, tall, motionless, standing directly in front of the couch. For a moment, my brain refused to process what it was seeing. My breath caught in my throat. My voice failed me. All I could do was put the phone down, plunging the room back into darkness, hoping, irrationally, that whatever stood there would disappear with the light. But it didn't. It waited. And then finally my voice cracked free. "Lena." No response. I picked up the phone again and turned on the flashlight. The beam hit her face. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't blinking. She was just staring down at me with an expression so empty it chilled the air around her. It was her, but not the version I'd met earlier. Her makeup was smudged. Her pupils were blown wide. Her jaw twitched like she was clenching it too hard. She looked feral, broken, hollowed out by something I didn't understand yet. I couldn't move. I couldn't run. I couldn't even sit up fully. And then she turned, not slowly, not hesitantly. She sprinted toward the stairs. A heavy slam echoed through the house a second later. By the time I could stand, she was gone, and the house felt violated in a way I cannot fully describe. Like my own walls were working against me, hiding secrets I didn't know I had. What she stole made everything clear. She didn't want my money. She didn't want my electronics. She didn't want anything sentimental. She wanted my pills. Every bottle, every supplement, every prescription, including ones I hadn't touched in months. That was when the sickening realization settled deep in my stomach. She hadn't come for me. She had come for whatever she could take from me, a desperate woman, a dangerous woman. A woman who hid her life behind perfume and lies and a smile that never reached her eyes. But the worst part wasn't what she took. The worst part was knowing she had been standing over me in the dark, watching me struggle to wake up, watching me fight for control of my own body. She could have done anything, and I would have been powerless. I'm sharing this story for one reason, because danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it walks into your home wearing perfume and a friendly smile. Sometimes it's the person you invite in. Sometimes it's the moment you ignore your instincts because you don't want to feel alone. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. I sat on the couch with every light in the house on, my back pressed against the armrest so I could see the entire room. My body was still weak, trembling with delayed fear. My mind replaying the moment her silhouette appeared in that small, cold glow from my phone. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt invaded, observed, tainted by a presence I had willingly invited inside. The police arrived about 40 minutes after I called, but that stretch of time felt like being trapped underwater. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow looked like her shadow. I kept checking the front door to make sure the deadbolt was still locked, as if she might materialize on the other side and try to force her way in again. When the officers finally knocked, I must have looked deranged because the first thing one of them said was, "Sir, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" I told them I had been drugged, though I didn't know what with or when exactly. They asked if I wanted an ambulance. I said no, because at that point everything in me was running on instinct, on some primal need to regain control over my space. I explained what happened, how Lena had come over, how she vanished, how I blacked out, how she was standing over me when I woke up. The officers exchanged a look I couldn't read, somewhere between concern and skepticism. I could tell they were trying to piece together the timeline. I handed them her Snapchat username, though by then it was already gone, deleted, or blocked, or both. I showed them the drawers she had emptied, the cabinet where prescription bottles used to be. They asked if anything else was missing, jewelry, electronics, cash, but nothing was. She was focused, strategic, singular in purpose. One of the officers stepped outside and knocked on my neighbor's door, even though it was after 1 in the morning. I watched from my living room window as my neighbor answered, half asleep, rubbing his eyes. They asked him if he'd seen anyone unusual or heard anything strange. He shook his head, said he'd been asleep since 10. The officer pointed toward my house. My neighbor looked over, confused, maybe trying to make sense of why several police cars were outside on a quiet December night. After about 20 minutes, the officers returned inside and told me they'd file a report, but without a full name or any concrete details, there wasn't much else they could do. The helplessness in that moment hit harder than I expected. Not just because they couldn't immediately solve it, but because suddenly the reality of what had happened sank deeper. I had let someone into my home who had likely done this before. Someone who knew how to disappear. Someone who watched me long enough to know exactly what she wanted. When they left, the silence creeped back in. It felt heavier this time, like the air itself remembered what had happened here. I walked through every room, checking closets, checking behind doors, checking under the bed, even though I knew she wasn't there. I needed to reclaim the space, even if just symbolically. But one thing stayed with me, something I didn't tell the officers because I didn't fully understand it at the time. It wasn't just the fear of having been drugged. It wasn't just the sight of her looming over me. It was the expression on her face when the flashlight hit her. There was nothing in her eyes, not anger, not panic, not guilt, just vacancy. A desperate, hollow void that suggested she'd been surviving on instinct for so long that she no longer recognized boundaries or remorse. I've seen people strung out before. I've seen people struggling. But this was different. This was someone operating like a shadow, moving with purpose but not intention, driven by something raw and uncontrollable. The perfume wasn't an accident. It was camouflage, a mask to hide a life she'd been living outside the lines. I barely slept for the next few days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her silhouette. Every bump in the night triggered a jolt of adrenaline. I stopped drinking wine completely. I couldn't stand the idea of being vulnerable in my own home. I double-checked the locks constantly, even during the day. It didn't matter that Christmas was days away. The holiday spirit was gone, replaced by the lingering image of her standing motionless in the dark. Eventually, I reached out to a friend who worked in social services. I told him the story. Not because I expected him to find her, but because I needed to understand what kind of person does something like this. He listened patiently, then said something that stuck with me. There are people out there who slip through every crack in the system. Addiction, homelessness, mental illness, it doesn't make them evil, but it does make them unpredictable when they're desperate. You just met someone who learned to survive by taking what she needed, no matter the cost. I wanted to feel empathy. I wanted to believe she was a victim of circumstance, not malicious intent. But the memory of her standing over me, the absolute stillness in her posture, the vacant intensity in her eyes, that wasn't something I could rationalize away. And the truth is, desperation doesn't erase danger. If anything, it amplifies it. I kept replaying the earlier moments of the night, searching for clues I should have noticed. The way she scanned the room when she entered, the way she fixated on the kitchen briefly, her gaze flicking toward the hallway where the bedrooms were. The way she spilled the wine, almost like she wanted to create a distraction. the dizzy feeling that washed over me before I even finished my first glass. She knew exactly what she was doing, and the most disturbing realization came weeks later, when I was finally ready to step back and examine the timeline more logically. She must have slipped something into the wine while I was in the attic. The attic ladder was positioned just enough to give her access to the counter while I was out of sight. She didn't have much time, but she didn't need much. She had done this before. The thought made my skin crawl. For days after the incident, I found myself checking the windows compulsively, making sure the curtains were closed. I drove different routes to work, afraid she might follow me even though I had no evidence of that. I felt like prey, and the sensation lingered long after the immediate danger was gone. One night, maybe 2 weeks after everything happened, I woke up at 3 a.m. to a soft tapping sound. My entire body tensed. I sat up slowly, holding my breath, listening. The sound repeated, 3 soft taps. For a moment, my heart stopped. I thought she had come back. But then I realized it was the tree branch outside my bedroom window brushing against the siding in the wind. I sat there for nearly 10 minutes before my heart rate slowed enough for me to lie back down. Trauma has a way of teaching you to hear danger even when it isn't there. But it also teaches you to recognize the signs when it is. The following weekend, something happened that made the fear resurface. I went to take out the trash, and when I opened the bin, I saw something that didn't belong to me. An empty perfume bottle, clear glass with a gold cap. The same cheap floral scent she had drenched herself in that night. I recognized it instantly. I froze. I hadn't put it there. No one else had access to my property. The bin sat behind my fence, tucked between my house and the neighbors. It wasn't the kind of place someone would accidentally toss trash while walking by. That meant one thing. At some point after that night, she had come back. Maybe not to break in. Maybe not to steal again. But she had been close enough to my home to dispose of something she no longer needed. That discovery led to a series of sleepless nights. I reported it to the police, but they said the same thing as before. Without identification, without surveillance footage, without a confirmed sighting, there wasn't much they could do. They offered to increase patrols in my neighborhood, which helped for a while, but the knowledge that she had returned created a new fracture inside me. It was a reminder that the story wasn't as closed as I wanted it to be. I eventually installed new locks, cameras, motion lights, anything that made me feel less exposed. Friends told me I was overreacting, that she had probably moved on, that she wouldn't risk returning to a place where she knew police had been involved. But intuition is shaped by lived experience, and mine had shifted permanently. Something that once felt safe, inviting someone into my home, now felt like the biggest mistake I'd ever made. It took months before I felt comfortable enough to have people over again. Even then, I never let anyone pass the threshold without knowing them extremely well. I no longer drink when I'm alone with someone new. I no longer ignore subtle discomfort. I no longer silence the voice in my head that says something feels wrong. What happened with Lena left a scar, but it also left something else. Awareness. Vigilance. A deeper understanding of how quickly normal life can tilt into danger. Most importantly, it reminded me that loneliness is not a weakness, but it can make you vulnerable if you don't respect its power. I still don't know where she went after that night. I don't know if she was arrested somewhere else or overdosed or disappeared into another neighborhood to repeat the same pattern. Part of me hopes she found help, that she found stability, that she found a version of herself that didn't need to drug strangers in their own homes. But the other part of me, the part shaped by the image of her standing above me in the dark, knows that some people live in a world behind ours, moving through shadows, driven by forces we can't fully understand. And sometimes those people cross our path at the worst possible moment. This was my moment. This was my warning. And this was the first of 3 true stories that happened during Christmas. Each one a reminder that danger doesn't take holidays off. Sometimes it knocks on your door. Sometimes it hides behind a smile. And sometimes, like in my case, it walks right in and doesn't reveal its true face until it's too late to stop it. I was 34 the first time I told this story out loud, and even then my voice still shook. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because childhood memories, real memories, have a way of holding on to you with a grip stronger than time. The mind forgets details, but the body remembers terror. If you've ever felt fear so deep that it reshapes the way you see the world, then you'll understand why this night still lingers in my bones. It happened on Christmas Eve, 1997, when I was 7 years old. My sister was 4. Our names were Aaron and Lily back then, just 2 Jewish kids living in a quiet, snow-covered neighborhood in upstate New York. That winter felt especially cold, the kind that sinks into the walls and turns every room into a little echo chamber. My father was a doctor at the local hospital. And because Jewish doctors often volunteered to work the Christmas shifts, he was on call that night. That left the 3 of us at home, my mother, my sister, and me. But if I'm being honest, it was really just my sister and me. My mother had been drinking heavily for years, though I didn't understand what alcoholism meant at that age. All I knew was that once the sun went down, she disappeared into her bedroom with a bottle, and the door stayed closed until morning. The house was big but felt small, dim but familiar, lonely but predictable. Most nights we made our own fun. We built forts out of blankets. We watched movies until we fell asleep on the couch. We whispered about things that scared us just enough to feel brave. That night started like any other. We were sitting together, wrapped in a blanket on the living room floor, watching a holiday movie. Not because we celebrated Christmas, but because nothing else was on TV. The menorah still sat on the dining table from earlier that month, its candles long melted down. I remember thinking about how quiet the house felt without my dad. Even at 7, I could sense the imbalance, the fragility that settled in when responsibility fell on small shoulders. It must have been around 8:30 when the knock came. Not a gentle tap, not the kind of knock you hear from a neighbor dropping off cookies. It was firm, intentional. 3 slow, heavy knocks that made the glass panes in our front door tremble just slightly. I froze. Lily sat straight up. We weren't allowed to answer the door at night. My dad had said it again and again. If someone knocks after dark, you call for me. You don't open the door. But he wasn't home. I stood up anyway. Something about the knock felt strange, but curiosity tugged at my feet. The hallway felt longer than usual as I walked toward the front door. The porch light illuminated the frosted glass, making the silhouette outside blurry and distorted. When I got close enough, I rose on my toes and looked through one of the glass panels. A man stood on our porch wearing a full Santa Claus suit, bright red jacket, thick white beard, black boots, a large bag slung over one shoulder. He smiled and waved at me as soon as he saw my face in the window. Everything in me tightened. Maybe because we weren't a Christmas house. Maybe because Santa had no business being anywhere near us. Or maybe because even at 7 years old, there was something in his smile that felt wrong. It didn't reach his eyes. It looked stretched, artificial, pinned into place like a mask. I didn't open the door. He leaned forward and cupped his hand around his eyes to peer inside. "Hey there," he said through the glass. "It's Santa. I've got something special for you kids tonight." His voice wasn't jolly. It was too deep, too certain, too practiced. I shook my head. "We're Jewish," I said, my voice small but steady, the way my father had taught me to speak when something didn't feel right. He chuckled softly. "Everyone deserves a visit from Santa, even Jewish kids. I've changed my rules this year." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. Lily appeared behind me, tugging the edge of my shirt. "Who is it?" she whispered. I didn't turn. I didn't want to take my eyes off him. "It's no one," I whispered back. "Go stay in the living room." She didn't move. Santa, if I can even call him that, tilted his head like he was examining me. "Go on," he said. "Open the door. I brought presents." It wasn't friendly. It was insistent. I narrowed my eyes. "Santa doesn't bring Jewish kids presents. We get Hanukkah presents." His smile faltered. Now something in his expression changed. Not dramatically, not enough for a child to scream, but enough for a child to sense danger. His eyes hardened. His voice lost its fake warmth. "Open the door," he repeated. I stepped backward instinctively. Lily grabbed my hand this time. The cold in the hallway deepened. Or maybe that was the fear settling under my skin. As calmly as I could, I whispered to Lily, "Go call 911. She nodded, then ran toward the phone on the kitchen wall. Santa started knocking again. Louder this time, sharper, faster. Not like someone seeking entry, but like someone losing patience. "Aaron," he called, his voice suddenly low. "I know you hear me. Let me in. Right now." The air felt thinner. The walls felt closer. I backed away from the door entirely. From the kitchen, I heard Lily's trembling voice. "Hi. We need help. Santa's at our house. He won't go away." There was a pause, a long one. Then Lily said, confused, "Yes, we know it's for emergencies. Nobody's trying to come in." Another pause. Her voice rose. "We are serious." And then a click. She turned to me, her eyes wide and glossy. She hung up. A 40-pound 4-year-old shouldn't have to face the realization that adults don't always listen. But that's exactly what happened in that moment. And something in me snapped into place. Not courage exactly, but responsibility. A feeling far too big for my small frame. We didn't know our father's number at the hospital. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't know what else to do. But Santa did. Because he came back to the door. This time he didn't knock. He pounded, heavy, violent fists hitting the wood so hard the wreath above the peephole shook with every impact. "I know the cops aren't coming," he shouted. "Open the door, let me in. Don't make this difficult." Lily screamed and hid behind me. I grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the stairs, away from the door, away from the windows, away from him. The pounding continued. My mother didn't wake up. She could sleep through storms, alarms, even shouting. Tonight was no different. We reached the landing at the top of the stairs. My heart was hammering so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I needed a plan, something smart, something fast. Then I remembered the smoke detector. We had one installed in the hallway near the ceiling. Dad had told me once that if it ever malfunctioned, it would alert the fire department automatically. At the time, I was too young to understand what that meant. But now, suddenly, I did. If I couldn't make adults understand my words, maybe I could make the alarm do the talking for me. I ran to the cabinet where we kept the menorah candles and grabbed a handful. Lily watched with confusion as I struck a match. I lit the candles one by one, my hands shaking so violently that melted wax dripped on my fingers. Then I blew them all out. A cloud of smoke curled upward toward the detector. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alarm screamed to life, shrill, ear-splitting, immediate. Lily covered her ears. I nearly dropped the candles. Santa's pounding stopped, and for a split second the world felt frozen. Then everything moved at once. Santa started shouting from outside, words I couldn't make out through the alarm. Somewhere down the street I heard the distant wail of sirens. Lily was crying. My chest burned from the smoke, but beneath all of it there was something else. Hope. More powerful than fear, more urgent than panic, a small, stubborn hope that we might get out of this alive. The fire alarm was still shrieking when the sirens grew louder, slicing through the cold Christmas Eve silence that had blanketed our street minutes earlier. I remember clutching Lily's hand so tightly her fingers turned pale. She didn't complain. She didn't cry anymore. She just stared at me with those wide, frightened eyes that made me realize I wasn't just a kid. I was all she had in that moment. We stayed upstairs because some instinct told me not to go near the door again. The alarm echoed through every wall, vibrating the wooden floors beneath our feet. It was almost unbearable, but at least unbearable noise meant help was coming. Then through the wailing of the alarm I heard another sound, a man's voice, his voice. "Thank God you're here," he shouted loud enough to be heard over everything. "My kids are inside!" My heart plummeted, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Smooth, confident, like he had rehearsed it, like he expected them to believe him. Footsteps crunched through the snow outside. Multiple voices, flashlights cut across the windows. A firefighter yelled, "Sir, you're their father?" "Yes," Santa yelled back. "Please break the door down. I dropped my keys earlier. They're trapped inside and the alarm won't stop." Panic spread through my chest. This was his plan now. Not to fool us, we already knew what he was, but to fool the adults. And adults believe other adults far more easily than they believe frightened children. Through the window at the top of the stairs, I saw 2 firefighters step onto our porch. One reached for an axe. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." Lily looked at me, terrified. "Aaron, what do we do?" There wasn't time to think. Only time to act. I dragged Lily down the stairs halfway, just enough so the firefighters could see us through the glass panes of the door. I waved my arms frantically. "We're not his kids," I yelled. "Don't let him in." The firefighter with the axe hesitated. He leaned closer to the door. "What did he say?" I pressed my face to the window pane. "We don't know him. We're Jewish. Santa doesn't come to our house." That last line probably sounded ridiculous, but for whatever reason it made the firefighter pause. He looked back toward the man in the Santa suit who suddenly no longer seemed to have anything to say. Another firefighter stepped forward. "Kids, where are your parents?" "My dad's at the hospital," I shouted. "My mom's asleep upstairs. She won't wake up. Please don't break the door." The firefighter exchanged a glance with his partner. Slowly, the axe lowered. "Sir," he said to the man dressed as Santa, "if these are your children, why didn't you mention you were Jewish?" Santa's smile twitched. "What?" "Well, I mean, they're half..." The firefighter's expression hardened. "Sir, step away from the house." Santa didn't move. "Now." This time he did. Not because he wanted to, but because he realized the performance was collapsing. But he didn't turn to run. He didn't drop the act entirely. Instead, he tried one last time. his voice shifting into something darker, something sharper. "Kids lie," he said. "They get scared. They make things up. Just open the door so I can get them." Every muscle in my body tensed. Lily squeezed my hand again. I felt her shaking. The firefighter didn't budge. "Sir, you need to remain where you are. If you approach the door again, we will restrain you." The man didn't take a step forward, but he also didn't step back. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed. And beneath the beard, his face twisted with the realization that his plan had failed. That's when another set of sirens approached. The police. The moment he heard them, something inside him snapped. He turned and tried to run, but two firefighters grabbed him almost instantly. He fought, wildly, violently, kicking and twisting like a man possessed, but they forced him to the ground until the police arrived to take over. Even as they pulled him up, he kept staring at the house. Not at the firefighters, not at the officers, at us. At me. I still remember the way his eyes locked onto mine through the window, full of something beyond anger, something more like obsession. Like he wanted to remember my face, as if he already had. The officers dragged him toward the patrol car. He didn't speak again, didn't shout, didn't beg. He just watched us until the last possible second. And then the door shut, and he was gone. Inside, the firefighters convinced me to open the door only after the man had been secured. They stepped into the house, checked the rooms to make sure no one else was inside, and eventually silenced the fire alarm. The house didn't feel quiet after that. It felt hollow. Like all the fear poured out of the walls but left a residue behind. One firefighter asked where my mother was. I pointed upstairs. He went to check on her, shook her gently, but she didn't stir. He came back down and knelt in front of me. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "That was incredibly brave." I didn't feel brave. I felt small, exhausted, and cold. The kind of cold that comes from fear, not weather. Another officer stayed with us until my father arrived. When he walked through the door, still in his scrubs, breathless, panic etched into every line on his face, I could see the moment his heart dropped. He didn't hug us at first. He knelt down and checked us head to toe, touching our arms, our faces, our hair, like he needed to make sure we were real and alive and whole. Only then did he pull us close, holding us so tightly I could barely breathe. Later that night, after the police finished their questions and the fire department left, I finally asked my dad the question that had been gnawing at me. "Why us?" He didn't answer right away. He stroked Lily's hair, staring at the silent front door. "There are people in this world," he finally said, "and who look for easy opportunities, houses where kids are alone, places where they think no one will stop them. You weren't targeted because of who you are. You were targeted because he thought no one would help you." I swallowed hard. But someone did help us. My father looked at me with a kind of pride I hadn't seen before. "Yes, you." I didn't know how to respond to that. 7-year-olds don't think about heroism, survival maybe, but not heroism. Still, that moment became something I carried with me long after the fear faded. The police never told us what they found out about the man in the Santa suit. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't want to tell us. Maybe his story was so dark it never made it to the surface. My father shielded us from the news. I only learned years later that sometimes predators wear costumes not to delight, but to disarm. Sometimes they choose a disguise that lowers your guard. Sometimes they knock on the doors of families who aren't expecting anyone. The scariest part isn't that he came to our house. The scariest part is that he walked up to it with absolute confidence, like he had done it before. Maybe many times. I don't know what his true intention was, but I know what it wasn't. It wasn't to bring joy. It wasn't to deliver gifts. It wasn't to wish us a Merry Christmas. And in some ways, being Jewish saved our lives that night, because his story didn't fit ours, because his lie couldn't bend around our truth, because sometimes the thing that makes you different is the very thing that keeps you safe. Even now, decades later, when the world around me begins to glow with holiday lights and December air feels heavy with nostalgia, there is always a moment, a flicker, when I remember the sound of those fists against the door, the voice of a stranger pretending to be someone magical, the look on his face when he realized two children were smarter than he expected. And I remember how close danger came that night, right up to the glass, as close as a breath, as close as a knock. The snow began falling just as we cleared the highway and turned onto the narrow road leading into the mountains. Fat, slow flakes drifting across the windshield, catching the headlights like dust suspended in honey. Elena leaned her forehead against the passenger window, smiling softly as the forest thickened around us. Her breath fogged the glass, and she traced a shape into the mist with her fingertip. A small heart, simple but deliberate. That was her way of communicating ever since our relationship began to fray. Soft gestures instead of difficult conversations. Warm glances instead of the vulnerability we'd both been avoiding. This trip was supposed to help with that. A getaway before Christmas. A few days in a cozy cabin where we could breathe and reconnect, maybe rediscover who we were before routines and exhaustion dulled us. We're almost there, I said, more to fill the silence than anything else. She nodded but didn't look away from the falling snow. Feels like a movie, she murmured. She was right. It did feel cinematic. A quiet December road, towering pines bending under fresh powder. Our little Jeep winding upward toward an Airbnb decked out with holiday decorations. The listing had looked magical. A log-style home with a big deck. Christmas lights strung across the railings, a hot tub overlooking the slope below. A fireplace, a loft, a basement, 3 bedrooms, even though we only needed one. At the time, I thought the place seemed too perfect, almost staged. Now I know that perfection can sometimes hide the heaviest shadows. We reached the gravel driveway after a 20-minute climb. The Jeep's tires crunched over the stones, headlights sweeping across an inflatable snowman and 2 light-up reindeer positioned near the porch. Everything glowed. Everything looked warm, safe, welcoming. It wasn't. The cabin was perched at the top of a small rise, surrounded by dense woods on all sides. Beautiful in the daylight, unsettling the moment darkness settled in. But for now, the Christmas lights twinkled brightly enough to keep the feeling romantic. Elena stepped out of the Jeep, stretching her arms overhead as if shedding the city and stepping into a calm she'd been craving. "This is perfect," she said, genuine warmth in her voice. "It already feels like Christmas." I wanted to believe her, I really did. We unloaded the luggage first, groceries next. 2 trips to the car, then a third because Elena insisted on bringing the extra blanket she loved. By the time we finished, the snow had thickened into a soft curtain falling around us. Inside, the cabin felt exactly like the listing promised. Warm lighting, a faint smell of pine and wood. A Christmas tree already set up in the corner, decorated with glass ornaments and glowing with soft yellow light. Stockings hung by the stone fireplace. Garland wrapped along the banister of the stairs leading up to the loft. everything arranged in a way that made the space feel lived in, even though we knew no one was supposed to be living here. I inspected the kitchen while Elena explored the upstairs loft. The fridge was clean, tile floors swept, windows locked. But there was something about the place I couldn't name, something in the air that felt unsettled, like the faint vibration in the back of your skull before a migraine. I didn't mention it to Elena. While she unpacked, I stepped down to the basement, flicking on the light at the top of the stairs. The bulb buzzed its way to life, illuminating a cold, unfinished space that smelled faintly of dust and damp wood. Laundry machines in one corner, a workbench with old tools. Concrete floor, the kind of basement that didn't invite curiosity. The kind that felt separated from the rest of the home, not physically but emotionally. I didn't go far in. I just stood at the bottom step listening. The silence down there was too thick, like the air wasn't circulating properly. When I turned the light off and climbed back up, I felt a small shiver run down my spine. Not from cold, but from that strange instinct humans have carried since we lived in caves, the sense of being watched. But when I reached the main floor again, the cabin seemed perfectly ordinary. Elena was lighting a candle near the fireplace, humming along to a Christmas song playing softly from her phone. I shook off the feeling and smiled as she turned. "You hungry?" I asked. "Starving." We cooked dinner together, chicken thighs, potatoes, broccoli, and a cornbread mix we grabbed last minute from the small-town dollar store. Elena teased me for forgetting to buy actual Christmas spices. I teased her for insisting we bring syrup even though no one eats syrup with chicken. It felt almost like we used to be. Comfortable, natural. After we ate, the storm intensified outside, snow sticking to the windows in uneven patches. The living room glowed with a kind of golden warmth, the tree lights reflecting off the glass ornaments in tiny sparks. We curled up on the couch and turned on the Polar Express, the only decent Christmas movie either of us could agree on. For the first hour, nothing existed outside that cabin except the storm. But storms have a way of hiding sounds you were never meant to hear. About halfway through the movie, Elena pressed her hand to my leg. "Did you hear that?" I muted the TV. We both sat still. Nothing. She frowned. I thought, never mind. But she hadn't imagined it. I could see it in her eyes. They held that same flicker of doubt I felt earlier when I stood in the basement doorway. I unmuted the TV, pretending it was nothing. But my attention had shifted. I started glancing toward the windows more often, staring past the reflection of the room, trying to make sense of the shifting shadows outside. By 9, we decided to try the hot tub. It sat on the deck overlooking the woods, steam rising gently under strings of Christmas lights that swayed in the wind. I turned them all on, the candy cane pathway lights, the reindeer, the snowman, anything that added illumination to the darkness around us. The hot tub water steamed into the cold air, casting fog upward in soft billows. We stepped in, sinking beneath the heat, letting the jets melt the tension from our backs. Snow drifted around us in white swirls, settling on the wooden railing before melting slowly away. It felt unreal, like a postcard scene brought to life. Then the jets stopped. Not gradually, not sputtering. They just shut off. A sudden silence dropped over the deck, so abrupt that my ears rang in the absence of sound. Elena lifted her head. Why'd it do that? Before I could answer, we heard it. Footsteps. Not the scatter of deer hooves, not branches falling, not snow shifting, footsteps. Slow ones, deliberate ones, crunching softly over fresh snow, circling the perimeter of the cabin. Elena's hand found mine underwater. Her grip tightened. "Mark," she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just listened. Every muscle in my body tensed. The steps moved past the deck, too far away to see clearly, too close to dismiss. Then they faded. Then silence again. "We should go inside," she whispered. We did. As soon as we were through the sliding door, I turned the deadbolt with a quiet click that echoed too loudly in my head. We dried off quickly and went straight to the shower, trying to shake off the chill, not from the cold water that ran out within minutes, but from the feeling that someone had been on the property with us watching. Afterward, we got into bed. Elena curled against me, small and trembling. I kept my eyes on the bedroom door, half expecting it to swing open. Sometime after midnight, I finally began drifting off. Then the banging started, sudden, violent, directly on the front door. Elena bolted upright, gasping. I was frozen for a second, heart hammering so hard I felt it in my throat. 3 more bangs, louder this time, not knocking, demanding. Elena grabbed my arm. "Don't go out there." I wasn't going to. Something primal told me that whoever was outside wasn't there for help, or by mistake, or with good intentions. They were banging because they didn't care who heard them, because they thought they could force their way in. We stayed silent, perfectly still, listening. A few seconds passed, then a full minute, then 2. The banging stopped. But silence didn't bring relief. It brought uncertainty. We didn't know whether the person had left, or whether they were still out there waiting. It took nearly half an hour before either of us relaxed enough to lie back down. Even then, sleep felt impossible. Every sound felt amplified, every creak felt suspicious. By morning, the storm had softened. Light snowfall dusted the porch, the trees, the Jeep. I stepped outside briefly to brush snow from the windshield. And that's when I saw them. Footprints, fresh ones, circling the cabin, leading from the tree line, around the deck, past the hot tub, to the front porch, right up to the door, and then back toward the woods. My breath caught. The fear from the night before wasn't paranoia. Someone had been here, close enough to touch the doorknob, close enough to see us through the windows. When I turned, I saw movement. A man stepping through the trees wearing a yellow-brown coat, ripped, dirty, weathered. He smiled when he saw me. He stepped out from between the pines as if he had been waiting for me to notice him. His yellow-brown coat hung open despite the cold, the fabric stiff and torn at the elbows, the edges stained with something darker than dirt. His boots were caked with snow, his beard uneven. He looked like someone who had spent a long time living at the edges of society, close enough to watch other people's lives, far enough that no one noticed him watching. He lifted a gloved hand in a casual wave. "Morning," he said. My throat tightened. Everything in me wanted to retreat into the cabin, lock the door, and pretend I hadn't seen him. But he had already seen me, and worse. He looked like he knew we were alone. I forced a polite smile, the kind you give strangers you don't want to engage with. "Morning. You need something?" He shook his head, stepping closer. Too close. The space between us felt suddenly fragile, like the wrong word could shatter it. No, he said, just checking in. Wanted to see how you two were settling in." My pulse stuttered. How did he know about Elena? She hadn't come outside. The man took another step forward. "You must be Mark." I froze. That wasn't information you could guess. "You the host?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded once. "I run the place with my brother." That line felt rehearsed, said too quickly, too easily. A line used often. Before I could respond, Elena opened the door behind me. "Mark, everything okay?" The man's eyes snapped toward her immediately, locking onto her with an intensity that set every instinct in my body on alert. He smiled again, that same slow, unnatural smile I recognized from people who didn't understand boundaries. "Hey there," he said. "I was just telling your boyfriend I'm Tom. I own this property with my brother. Anything you need, you just let me know." Elena stepped closer to me. She didn't say a word, but the tension in her posture said everything. I nodded stiffly. "Thanks. We'll let you know." He didn't leave right away. He lingered. Too long. Too still. His eyes drifting from me to the cabin, then back to the woods like he was mapping the space, noting exits, memorizing patterns, and then, without another word, he turned and walked into the trees, not toward a house, not toward a driveway, into the woods, as if he lived there. Elena closed the door as soon as he disappeared. The lock clicked immediately. "That's not the host," she whispered. "I know." I grabbed my phone the moment I could breathe again and messaged the actual host, Mike. I explained that Tom had shown up unannounced and claimed to be his brother. His response came fast. "What do you mean? I don't have a brother." My stomach dropped. I reread it twice, hoping I had misunderstood something. But the truth was plain. The man who approached us wasn't family, wasn't staff, wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the property. I typed back, "He said you run the place together." Mike responded, "I live 2 hours away and manage it alone. No one else should be there." A cold sweat broke across my neck. Elena saw the look on my face and covered her mouth with her hands. "Mark, we need to leave." "I know." We packed in less than 2 minutes. Not neatly, not carefully. We shoved clothes into bags, grabbed our toiletries half open, left food on the counter, left the candle burning until I went back and blew it out at the last second. Every sound felt too loud. Every shadow felt too sharp. I kept expecting the man in the yellow coat to appear at one of the windows. We carried everything outside in one frantic trip. Snow was still falling lightly, muting the noise of our footsteps. As I unlocked the Jeep, something told me to look up. I met his eyes in the rearview mirror. He was standing behind us, not even 30 feet away, watching, walking toward the Jeep with a speed that didn't match the calm expression on his face. Something in his gait was off, like someone trying not to appear threatening but unable to hide the urgency in their movements. "Elena," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Get in. Now." She didn't ask questions. She climbed in and slammed the door. I jumped into the driver's seat and hit the lock button just as he reached the back bumper. The Jeep roared to life. His expression changed instantly, from blank curiosity to something sharper, something hungry, something almost triumphant, like he thought he had us cornered. He stepped closer. I didn't wait. I put the Jeep in drive and punched the gas. The tires spun on the snow for half a second before catching traction. The Jeep lurched forward. In the mirror, I saw him stumble but keep moving toward the road like he meant to follow us on foot. The forest swallowed him within seconds. I didn't slow down. Not for curves, not for potholes, not for anything. Elena was crying quietly, staring at the passenger mirror to make sure he wasn't behind us. When we reached the main road, I grabbed my phone and called Mike. My voice shook as I told him everything: the man, the woods, the footprints, the knocking in the night. He didn't stay on the line long. He said he was calling the police immediately and heading to the cabin. As we drove away from the mountain, I kept checking the rearview mirror even though I knew he couldn't follow us. But some fears don't care about logic. We drove aimlessly for 2 hours just to calm down. We stopped at a diner and sat in the car instead of going inside. Neither of us could stand the idea of being around strangers. Eventually, we drove back home earlier than planned. That night, Mike called again. His voice was unsteady. The police went through the entire cabin, he said. Everything looks untouched, but they found something in the basement. My chest tightened. What did they find? A sleeping bag, some wrappers, a water bottle. Looks like someone's been staying down there for a while. I swallowed hard. So he wasn't just wandering by. No, Mike said quietly. He wasn't. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every sound of the apartment settling felt like footsteps. Every passing car cast a shadow that made my heart pound. I kept seeing him in my mind. The coat, the eyes, the way he looked at Elena like she was part of a plan he had already formed. The scariest thing wasn't that he watched us, it was how comfortable he seemed doing it. Like he'd done it before, like he expected to get away with it again. Weeks passed before the anxiety softened. Even now, winter triggers something in me. The smell of pine, the way snow dampens sound, the look of footprints leading toward a house instead of away from it. Sometimes I think about how easily the night could have gone differently if we hadn't checked the hot tub, if the knocking had come while we were showering, if we had ignored the footprints, if I had waited one more minute before starting the car. Sometimes safety is just a series of small decisions you don't realize matter until they're the reason you're still alive. This was ours. This was our Christmas story. Not the kind with magic or miracles, but the kind that reminds you how thin the line is between comfort and danger. Between celebration and fear, between being alone in a cabin and being watched without knowing it. And sometimes danger doesn't need to break in. Sometimes it's already inside. If you're still here, breathing a little deeper than usual, maybe checking your windows or your front door, then you understand why these stories stay with us long after they're told. They aren't just scary, they're reminders of how fragile comfort can be and how quickly ordinary moments can shift into something unforgettable. But they also show something powerful, the strength in intuition, the courage in acting fast, the impact of choosing to trust that quiet voice in your chest that whispers, something isn't right. Whether it's a stranger who steps a little too close, a knock that comes a little too late, or a feeling that doesn't fade no matter how much you try to ignore it. Your awareness matters. Your instincts matter, and your safety matters most of all. Thank you for spending your time here with me tonight, and for letting these stories settle into your thoughts. If you want more true tales like this, stories that dig deeper, linger longer, and remind us to stay alert in a world full of hidden shadows, be sure to subscribe. It truly helps more than you know. Stay safe, stay aware, and until next time, good night.